All right, folks, we are back with another Pangburn open mic discussion. Oh, yeah. It's happening. Just had to adjust something. Well, it's Tuesday. Tuesday, I really loved our conversation about physics, the wonders of physics last week. So I am going to reserve Tuesdays to be kind of our hard science day. Where we just do some reading and talk about aspects of whatever scientific topic comes up. And I wanted to reserve a day for that. So Tuesdays will be that day. So you will see that reflected in our weekly schedule. Where can you find the weekly schedule? Go to pang-burn.com/schedule and you will find the weekly schedule. Sounds pretty straightforward. Almost too straightforward. But yeah, today's topic is the wonders of biology. But before we get into that, quick announcement. Tomorrow at 11 a.m. Pacific, in and around that time, I will be going live on the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Pangburn, to have a conversation with none other than Beta Jesse Lee Peterson. Jesse Lee Peterson, very polarizing pastor. He's got his own show. He's been on radio and TV for a very long time. But he is one of the funniest guys on the internet to me. I think he has a lot of archaic traditional ideas that are just so outdated. It's like peering into like the 1920s or 30s in this man. It's quite interesting. But I want to talk to him about social issues. He's always talking about social issues, specifically ones related to the Black community. So we'll talk about that. And also, he is a pastor. He's a God-believing Christian, so we'll get into that too. And I want to talk to him about politics, probably an area we will have our most agreement in, and maybe some of the social issues too. It'll be interesting to see where that conversation goes, but I'm excited for that. Just so you all know, if you guys are wondering on YouTube, we are doing our open mic discussions we're live streaming them on Twitch right now for the time being. We're trying to get our YouTube monetization back, so we're trying not to do anything to trigger any kind of negative views from YouTube, because we don't know exactly why we lost our monetization, so we're just doing everything possible to get that monetization back. So yeah, we're live streaming on Twitch for now, and then uploading the videos after to YouTube. Yeah. So, any more announcements? Just a quick reminder that our December Q&A guest is Tarek Fatah. He is a Marxist journalist from Canada. He's very polarizing. Check him out on Twitter. But he's going to be our Q&A guest. We had Lawrence Krauss last Wednesday, which was just phenomenal. You guys can check that video out on YouTube. But Tarek Fatah will be very interesting for this Q&A. If you're someone out there that really is worried about or scared of Marxist ideology, this would be a good opportunity to ask some tough questions. So yeah, that'll be happening December 10th. And if you want to get access to that, just become a Pangburn subscriber at pang-burn.com/subscription. Okay, well, I want to get into this today. Let's just jump right into Dal Sue. Dal, what fascinates you most about biology?
Recently, it's been the idea that I heard out of Brett Weinstein when he was talking to Richard Dawkins about the possibility that religion is, I think he said, a secondary phenotype, sort of evolutionary evolved trait of civilization in order to perpetuate our genes into the future. And I think it's a pretty interesting idea, especially compared to Richard Dawkins and his idea that religion is a mind virus.
Yeah.
I think it's a...
So, the utility versus brain bug or mind virus debate, a very popular topic amongst evolutionary biologists. That was a Pangburn event, by the way.
I thought it was.
Yeah, that was an exciting event. Unfortunately, with that event, the people responsible for taking the video and recording the event, we ended up losing, like, I think it was 15 minutes of the discussion. We received all of the, we paid to have it documented. We received all the footage and audio back, and there was just this chunk missing.
Wow. What was missing exactly? Was it?
Well, we don't know, looking back at it now, like what there. But if you watch the video, there's just kind of this blip in it, and then it jumps to later on in the conversation. So I guess this just means got to get those guys together again to have another conversation.
Oh no!
At least one, but yeah, sometimes with live events, man, shit like this can happen, and even if you have a backup, we even had a backup audio recording running, but the venue's version of that malfunctioned. Like it was just a perfect storm of to lose this. I think it was 15-20 minutes of discussion. It was fucking terrible.
Yeah, I know. I would definitely be interested in hearing that discussion again, because I was surprised when Dawkins was pushing back as hard as he was against that idea, because it seems to...
I think he's right
really
to push
fit
back,
with his book.
Honestly.
I mean, I think someone has to, for sure.
Yeah.
I was just surprised that Dawkins took his position.
Well, Richard has definitely... he's been thinking hard on this for a long time. The brain bug versus utility question of religious hierarchy. Now, what Richard would say is that this idea of hierarchy, the greatest good, is something that serves a purpose in human biology. But for someone to say that it has to be religious or that it has to be a God type figure or archetype, I think is a mistake, and I think that's where Richard would push back.
So basically, that Brett Weinstein would say that like God is the evolved trait.
Well, I would have to listen to what his claims are again, but I do remember hearing them, and I'm just like I'm hearing a lot of like the same thing I hear when people are making special pleading arguments and trying to apply them to, or they see something that did occur or was quite frequent in human history, and then they then jump to the conclusion that there is probably something necessary about that certain type of, let's say, narrative or I would say art. So yeah, and I don't see any evidence that it needs to be that way. It's like, just because something did happen a certain way doesn't mean it needed to be that way. Obviously, from a deterministic standpoint, sure, but not in the sense of like, okay, we could have very well had an evolved society where they understood these things to be, useful myth. It's conceivable.
Yeah. I tend to agree with you. I don't think it has to be I don't think it has to be religion. It doesn't have to be
right.
God. And I think that's pretty evident with stuff like Buddhism and Taoism and
right.
that side of things, where there's not really a physical third-party entity separate from time and the universe and all of that.
Right.
Did we start with abiogenesis and immediately get onto religion?
No, we were just we started off, Dal brought up the conversation between Dawkins and Brett Weinstein that I produced, and Brett pursuing this idea of religiosity as a feature, not a bug, and Richard would push back against that to say, it's not you could conceive of religions that act as a feature, but religions themselves aren't necessarily going to be a feature for human evolution.
Okay.
Definitely, like, it evolved in the sense that it competed with neighboring factions that weren't of the same religion. But I wouldn't say that the Christian God is a necessary facet of evolution. It would just be a single instance of an evolved trait of a society that outcompeted, or at least may have helped that society outcompete others.
Isn't it funny how anytime science like finds some shit, the Christians are immediately like, God is amazing, and it's like, fuck you. Like, no. Well, obviously in Genesis, when God said 7 days, it didn't mean 7 literal days. It meant the eons that science have proven to exist.
One thing, I would say from an artistic perspective, gods are quite extraordinary. They're cool. They're interesting, just like superheroes are. They have powers and they can do magic, but you know they don't have they don't have that one actual existence thing that kind of makes them so cool. Like when people are talking about ghost stories or haunted buildings, it kind of loses a certain amount of gusto when you realize that it's just all make believe and play.
Some people take that shit seriously. So you know how Mother Teresa was kind of a giant.
You're breaking up there, girl.
You know how Mother Teresa was like seriously a bitch?
Yeah, she kind of promoted this idea of just bending over and taking it.
Yeah, like I brought that up to my roommates last night, and it didn't go over so well. I was like, oh, whoops.
Yeah. So here's something interesting. I'm gonna be just like throwing in some crazy human biology facts today.
Okay.
25% of adult human bones are in the feet.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty extraordinary.
That's true. Well, it's not far off with hands either.
Right.
There's a similar number. The only problem is the ankle is what gives it so much more.
Right.
It's that 90-degree turn that makes it more complicated.
Yeah.
It's fascinating how it works.
It's so crazy how important opposable thumbs are in evolution.
It is.
Why do we have hands?
Well, if you think of like food collection and foraging, if you have a time in evolutionary history where digging had to occur, or you know, type things like soulfish will like use their body to dig at the ground. It's like you start developing this genetic over just a vast amount of time, genetic predisposition to get better at that.
So I have a question. Based off what you just said, the vast time and stuff. Are all sciences just explanations of time in different ways?
I think time is one of the key factors that we use to measure and relate to scientific findings, for sure.
I think that's the main thing that science tends to point out is if you take what you know and add time to it, here's what really happens. Most misconceptions come when you bring it's the limitation of the brain, right? Like it can only process so far out. So we only deal in right now. We can't keep time in our head on the choices we make. Does that make sense? Like it doesn't, like time doesn't become a factor inherently in decision making the way it ought to.
Well, I mean, one of the advantages we have is future planning compared to other apes.
Right.
It's one of the things that, our big memories and also our future planning, looking into the future and making what I would call pleasure investments is one thing that really does give us a huge advantage, and especially from an intelligence perspective.
I agree with that.
Yeah. Here's another one. A human's ears and nose never stop growing. They continue to grow.
Mm-hmm. Moses was an elephant.
Yeah,
I just thought of
biblical
that.
characters that lived to like 900 years old, they just had gigantic noses and.
Could they fly? Like Dumbo?
They just like blew out their nose and were able to use it as like a rocket pack. There are more
Taoist sages could fly.
There are more bacteria in a human mouth than there are people in the world.
I'm not surprised at all.
Yep. Interesting. If a human being's DNA were uncoiled, it would stretch 10 billion miles from Earth to Pluto and back.
Yeah, couldn't it go to the moon and back like 160,000 times?
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
Well, apparently like enough to Pluto and back. That's incredible.
What are we stretching it out towards? Like one atom at a time? Or is it like one?
DNA is made up of amino acids wound tightly around protein.
Right.
And they eventually collapse in on themselves to create the shape of chromosomes. And it's so dense, like proteins are crazy because they can be so dense.
I always found this fascinating. Like the bone is human bone is 5 times stronger than a steel bar of the same width, but it is brittle and can fracture on impact. Isn't that strange?
That is crazy. Biology is very bizarre.
The body can detect taste in 0.0015 seconds, which is faster than the blink of an eye.
It hits some sensors, right, and sends electric signals to your brain.
Yeah.
It'd be faster than hearing, I would think.
Every hour.
That's why like the layered integration nature of consciousness is so fascinating, because it's so many things happening at the same time, but your body like tricks you into thinking that you're perceiving them all at once.
Yeah.
That's something that acid will do, or like psychedelics will do, is they'll take away that integration sometimes.
Did you know that your eyes are actually brain matter that's been squeezed out of your skull?
And not your whole eyes, it's just your...
Yeah, it's a part, isn't it? It's the, is it the lens? Let's see. Eyes are brains.
I understood it to be like the same way that teeth are bones.
The human brain...
Teeth aren't really bones.
The eye is the only part of the brain that can be seen directly. So it's a part of the brain. This happens when the optician uses an ophthalmoscope and shines a bright light into the eye as part of an eye examination.
Yeah.
Sounds it.
I also think it's interesting how the optic chiasm is an X. It's like this big white X on the underside of your brain, so that opposite hemispheres are responsible for like your left hemisphere sees with your right eye.
Yeah, that's interesting.
My sister is actually blind in one eye. Forgot about that.
What was that study that was not really a study, but like to prevent seizures, they would like bisect the brain, leave it in your skull.
It's called a corpus callosotomy, where they corpus
Yeah.
split brain
And then
split brain surgery is how they refer to it. And you can have
That-
one half that is an atheist and one half that is a Christian. It's crazy. Like, consciousness is so non-integrated and unintuitive that once you have the corpus callosum, it's like your right hemisphere and your left hemisphere are different people.
See,
I can't remember which one it is, but one of them doesn't have the ability to like speak. But if you put a pencil in that hand, it'll like write shit out, and you're not even aware of it.
Yeah, my first book, one thing I'm coming to the conclusion of is that I think the illusion of consciousness, it makes it all seem very, very complicated, but I don't think it is. I think
okay.
I think it's it's many simplistic things just happening very, very rapidly, which I don't think is actually a very complicated concept.
Travis, consciousness is not complicated. Pangburn out here.
Yep, that's
I
some
think I would agree with you.
conclusions I'm coming to.
I tend to think it's an emergent property of whatever the hell's going on.
I mean, obviously, consciousness isn't. I mean, it's not obvious. It seems that consciousness isn't a property, but it
Is
might
it what?
not be.
You broke up a
Like,
little bit. What'd you say?
It seems like consciousness is an emergent property, but it might not be. We don't know.
Well, the other option is that it goes against or not really against, but it would do something different than everything else does, which would be.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm not saying
all of the
I think
evidence
it's
shows
likely.
that it's coming from the brain.
Yeah.
I mean, until we solve the hard problem of consciousness, we can't know for.
Well,
But
I mean,
I
don't think the standard always is knowing for sure, though. The evidence just suggests that the this label of consciousness is how we are describing what the emergent qualities of the brain. I think
just like gravity.
Yeah, I think the problem with the term is that it just, when I hear people like Sam Harris and people like let's say Michio Kaku or any of these science communicators, when they talk about their definition of what consciousness is, I get the sense of what's being communicated is this idea of general awareness, and that
if we go with Nagel, we say
has always bothered me.
A thing is conscious if it is like something.
Huh?
And I don't. A thing. I mean, if we agree with Nagel, which I do, a thing is conscious if it is like something. So
if it is like something,
I think that's a very poor definition.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you can think that, but you're going really against the grain here.
Not really.
Hold on.
That's a poor
Which, I mean, that's fine, but it's just on my end. It just all sounds like sense, and I'm just over here like laughing at the Dunning-Kruger-ness of this conversation.
What?
So how are we gonna define consciousness?
Yeah, because if you say consciousness is if you're like something, like that's a complete
That's not what I said. That's not what I said.
We misheard you then, because I heard that too.
Yeah, we heard that.
That's what I heard
as well.
Is it like something to be you? Is it like something to be my dog?
Does
my dog have an experience?
Only a human can identify it.
Like
is it like something to be? Yeah, is it like something to be the chair that my TV is sitting on?
All we heard is
not.
All we heard is it like something? We didn't hear the last part.
So basically, if you can describe the experience of being X, that would be consciousness.
Yeah, is it having an experience?
So you're of the opinion that if I built a robot version of you that like could describe its experience of being you, you would say it might not be you, but it's conscious at least?
That is A, not at all what I said, and B, a problem that hasn't really been solved yet. I mean, it's being talked about a lot.
No.
Well, I mean,
hold on. You're saying that if something can describe what it's like to be itself,
No,
then
that's
it's
not
conscious.
what I said. Is that what I said? No.
Well, you're saying that a chair can't describe what it's like.
That's
And
not what I
enlighten us,
said.
right?
No,
I
that
think
is
we're
that is
misunderstanding.
absolutely 100% not what I said.
Well, then we're completely not understanding. Can you try a different approach?
What I said is it like something to be my chair? I didn't say my chair can tell me that it's like something to be my chair.
We don't. Okay, what's this something then? Because we don't understand what like something to be a chair means.
I can't really make it any simpler.
Well, then make it more complicated.
Yeah. There's a
Jesus Christ.
there's a
I mean, if you can't
This
follow
is-
me
this-
here, then
no, Michaela, it's a problem with the consciousness conversation. Everyone thinks that
No,
they have
it
a good
really-
definition. Yes,
Yeah.
it is
and
actually,
it's
Michaela.
It's not
There's
as
a
though everybody
different-
has these different definitions. Most people, most of the time, mean the same thing.
Oh, really? You can read their minds
Yeah.
on that.
I would disagree
Jesus
with that.
fucking
Yeah,
Christ.
Michaela, you don't. The definition of consciousness coming from Sam Harris versus Michio Kaku. Okay, she ran away. Okay.
I'm not sure what she's trying to
hashtag trigger.
say.
Yeah, I think her.
I don't know.
Something a little bit more subtle than what it was coming across as.
Yeah, but also
We
like
totally
she started citing the Dunning-Kruger effect when we're asking questions. That's not good discourse. Anyways, but yeah, I think there's a lot to be discovered, and I think when I hear the various definitions of what neuroscientists think consciousness is, versus sometimes a theoretical physicist will take a stab at it, you'll hear very simplistic forms of a best way to describe it, and then you'll hear some more intricate versions of it that cite some of the more deep biological components. But I don't think this is as cut and dry as Miller was trying to make it sound. It's literally the deepest mystery that we've probably the deepest mystery we haven't solved yet.
Yeah, I think it's pretty telling that people are weirdly confident in the ways they define consciousness.
Yeah, I agree.
I think that everyone like that to me says that it's something along the lines of what we're thinking is true. Something along the lines of it emerging from me.
Yeah, I think we have I mean an incredible amount of evidence to demonstrate that brain dead is dead and brain living seem to have some lived experience with it. And that lived experience, at least for human beings, we've kind of called that consciousness. And fair enough, we have to put a label on it. I just see the label being used in so many different ways. It's kind of, I see it as ill-defined.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest problem with the hard problem of consciousness is that we don't know what consciousness is.
Yeah, exactly. Like Jordan Peterson says, we don't know what it is. And if you claim that you do and you can demonstrate it, it is the greatest discovery probably in human history.
Yeah. It's almost...
So it hasn't been discovered yet.
There's like a Buddhist or Taoist proverb that's touching on this, but it's basically like there isn't an answer. Like that you go and you search in your mind looking for... That's what it was. So the master says to the student, the student says to the master, "Hey, help me. I'm having a problem with my mind. I can't restrain myself. I can't settle my mind." And the master says, "Well, bring out your mind and let me see it, and I'll settle it for you." And he says, "I can't find it when I look for it." And that, I think, is our answer, really. If we try to look for and define consciousness, we realize that they're not really there.
Well,
it's just an experience, sort of.
Yeah, so that's this is something I'm coming to a conclusion of in my book, is that how you just said it isn't really there. I think there's actually two answers to what's going on, and one answer doesn't really suffice. And I think that's kind of the root problem we're dealing with. We're trying to use one term to describe two different things that are going on. Because there's the regurgitation of what the brain is doing, and I think that's the thing that we have been labeling as consciousness, the stuff we are aware of. But that does not explain the drive, the selection process of what is being decided to be calculated. You know, that's the deep mystery is why can't I predict what I'm going to think next? Well, because I'm not selecting it. I'm not deciding it. And then the question, the deepest question after that is, what is selecting it? And what is the system? What is the selection system and delivery system? And that's what my pleasure drive theory deals with. And I think I make strong arguments as to how, you know, there is this at stage one, there is this little thing sitting in this at the very first seat, and it's selecting based on pleasure payback, and it's taking into consideration all of the information being fed to it through our sensory receptors.
What are you defining as pleasure?
Well, essentially any pursuit that is selected, any selectable pursuit. So it can be as something as simple as, and you have to think in the world of the very, very small, like why, like as I'm talking to you guys right now, I just moved my hand probably 10,000 different ways in that moment, and it didn't have to be that way, but that is what my motor system did. So you have to think of the very, very. I'm talking like.
Can't those just be systems checks?
We're doing billions of these per second.
Couldn't those just be systems checks?
Well, yeah, systems checks would be part of the pleasure drive.
But what's the pleasure out of a system check though? That's maintenance, not
survival.
Resultory, right?
Survival maintenance is part of the pleasure feedback. We actually get.
Okay, I think that's why we agree so much, because you're operating. You've put one layer above where I'm normally playing in my thoughts. If that makes sense, I'm starting at survival. I don't think I've moved up to where you are yet.
Right. Yeah. So I think literally every single thing that emerges, like every pursuit that is selected, every thought, everything that emerges is pleasure driven, and I think we have good evolutionary precedent for this, and I think I actually demonstrate this in my book. So I think there's some interesting conclusions coming out of this, and it's kind of like when I'm looking at the theory of everything. I think these things are kind of more simplistic than we imagined, perhaps, and not.
I absolutely agree with that, and that's why I'm operating a little bit under. I don't see human scale like you do. I don't know why, but I do see math scale like you do. Does that make sense? And so that's why I can't. That's why it's a little rough for me to see your shape, because it's so much bigger than what I'm used to looking at. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I'm trying to figure it out too. Sorry.
I had to drop a triggered response for Miller.
No. That's unfortunate.
I hope she comes back.
I do too.
Yeah. I think the evidence of the stream shows that there wasn't Dunning-Kruger happening. There was conversation and discovery, daring to think.
Maybe.
Yeah, but what are some other aspects of biology that interest us?
I don't know. I think the attraction what is the attraction in the eye? Why is that a thing?
Well, the eye, the eye basically, as far as I understand, and I'm not an evolutionary biologist, but my understanding is that, it formed to better view shadows and light in order to, to help survival. So, it's
We're looking at who do we think can see the most? It belies understanding. Maybe.
Well, I think I think it just, the evolution of let's go, evolution of the eye. I just want to make sure.
Oh yeah,
right.
that.
I think this is
Oof. There's a fascinating video. Oh, I don't know if I could find it, and I don't even remember who was doing it. But it was on the evolution of the eye.
Here, I'll read this from Science World. Understanding eyes. To understand how eyes evolved, you first need to know how they work. Your eyes act like tiny cameras installed into your head, taking in the light your brain needs to build images. The parts you can see, so they're very, very much related to light. The parts you can see when you look in the mirror are the sclera, cornea. Sclera, yeah, cornea, iris, and pupil. Inside there is a lens, retina, and a jelly-like tissue called the vitreous humor. All of these
vitreous humors.
Yeah, this one says humor, but all of these components are packaged together into an organ that is roughly the size of a ping pong ball. What is it? Sclera?
Sclera, yeah.
Sclera.
Either one.
Is the white part of your eye, covered in tiny blood vessels. It is made out of a tough material which protects the delicate inner components. The cornea is the dome of transparent tissue on the outer eyeball. It acts like a window that allows you to see outside while protecting everything inside. Okay, so from simple to complex. Scientists think the earliest version of the eye was formed in unicellular organisms who had something called eye spots. These eye spots were made up of patches of photoreceptor proteins that were sensitive to light. They couldn't see shapes or color, but were able to determine whether it was light or dark out. These unicellular organisms would use photosynthesis to create food for themselves. So being able to determine where the most light was coming from created a huge advantage for them. Okay, so that's a pretty good explanation. Over time, the unicellular creature would evolve, and its eye spot evolved along with it. Scientists believe a depression formed around the light-sensitive spot, creating a pit that made its vision a little sharper. Right, and the pit's going to give you depth perception eventually. Yeah, interesting.
Does the pit give you? I thought a second eye gave you depth perception.
Let's see. Over time, eventually the pit's opening could have gradually narrowed, creating a small hole that light would enter, much like a pinhole camera. From there, a retina would develop, as well as a lens in front of the eye. Over millions of years, small changes that confer a survival advantage would chance a simple light-sensitive structure through the complex eyes we have now. Yeah, interesting.
Dawkins has a great demonstration of this online.
Anything by Richard communicating this stuff is amazing.
So on his science and that stuff, I think he is a premier communicator. I agree completely.
Yeah, and going back to the consciousness thing, I think the thing that we're going to discover is we have to come up with. I think we're going to have to install, in order to get like the emergent mind properties in AI. I think we're going to have to install a pleasure drive system, something that is a
Question.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Must that be hardware?
Well, it's a weird thing, right? With AI, it's like, what is hardware and what is software?
No, I'm saying in particular, the pleasure drive you're talking about.
Oh, right.
Does that need to be hardware, or is that solely software? Or can that survive solely in the software? And if that's the case, then does that make the pleasure drive a emergent property rather than a hard thing? It's kind of where I'm going.
Well, I think my findings is that it has to be I think it's a fundamental requirement for life, and I think it's connected to, in some way, which I don't know yet, but I think it's connected to the law of life, the physical law that allows self-replication to happen. So I think there is some kind of connection there that yeah.
Is life the capacity to add one to one structure?
I just think we already have the term for it. I think it's self-replication, and then the question is why does a non-self-replicating
here's what I was thinking, because this is going to sound weird, but thinking of a rock as if a rock breaks, it replicates itself. If you understand what I'm saying, like one becomes two, then if those break, two become three, blah 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 blah. Over time, they break down enough, go back into magma, come back up as one solid rock, boop, 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 break out, right? The only reason that they don't get bigger is because they don't have the capacity to add to themselves.
Well, I would say replicate themselves. So I think we already have physical law to describe
I see what you're saying.
Phenomenon,
I see what you're saying.
or let's say that
saying.
process of splitting up, of material splitting up like that. And I think we have the physical laws to describe that. What I think we are missing is a physical law to describe how something can, like a single cell, can copy itself. And an even deeper question is, why would it? Where does that impulse come from? Well, I think what we're likely going to discover is that we need to write into the physical laws a new law of life, which simply says that when the proper abiogenesis components are in place, and then you add the time element to it, this self-replication of cells becomes, it just will happen. It will emerge.
So, here's a question. Do these principles apply to a thought?
Well,
thoughts replicate?
Yeah. So this is something I don't want to give too much, but that question you just asked is kind of an interesting one that I'll leave a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
Because that one is an interesting discovery I think I've made in my book. And
okay, so I think I'm catching up to you up here.
Yeah,
I think I understand what you're saying, and if you want to, I understand.
I gotta
book.
I gotta have something left for the book.
Exactly. Gotcha.
Although I
Okay.
think
I'm tracking what you're saying.
I think the most fun thing about my pleasure drive theory is that it is fun and it's going to be short. I'm trying to make the book as short as I can. It started off being ridiculously long and way too much, and I've simplified it, and I agree with Lawrence Krauss that science books should be short. I've simplified it, and I use this analogy of this shipping dock system, shipping from the hardware to the software, and then to this emergence or this awareness level. So it goes through all these kind of fun metaphors and analogies. I mean,
I'm excited to hear much more about this and get into it. It's fascinating.
Yeah. So Michaela says, I've spent most of my life trying to have conversations with people who just aren't capable of having them. I'm fatigued of it. When I see that it's happening, I just take an L because I have no patience left for it. Wow.
I'm sorry she's in distress.
LOL.
And you got any more facts?
Yeah, definitely. Let me go back to this. A person's feet. Man, the feet are so interesting. A person's feet has about five.
You're digging into a whole genre of YouTube. Keep going.
Oh, I'm actually on
I'm just thinking feet fetishes.
Fact Retriever. It always blows my mind, some of this stuff. A person's feet has about 500,000 sweat glands and can produce about a pint of sweat a day. Yeah, feet are sweaty, man.
That's bad. I think it's rough.
A human sneeze can travel about 100 miles per hour or more.
Cool Slow-Mo Guys video of those.
Oh, yeah?
They've got some good... They had a video about it that was... I think that was one of the Slow-Mo channels, too.
Okay, now this one is crazy. The human brain uses just as much power as a 10-watt light bulb.
Yeah.
That's...
Why do you think you get so tired? Just from school.
Yeah. Well, and I think this, sleep with regards to the brain is kind of a bit of a mystery, but I think it's got to be related to just the sheer energy,
right?
Resting.
Rest. Now you're getting to what I am working on.
Yeah, lay it on me.
Well, how do you know what rest is?
Well, and it's a good question, and also, why? It's it's how do you know what rest is?
You want to know the question that got me going there?
And are we even resting?
To kind of frame this. This is the question that got me started a bunch of years ago. We know speed of light and causality and stuff, right? That's how fast it can go. But we don't know what absolute zero means. So my question, just as a thought experiment, was what direction do I take off from the Earth to hit zero? And with what speed do I need to go to hit zero speed compared to causality? That's as far as you can go with it, really. But, it's not far off from trying to imagine nothing, right? Because in order for you to go any direction away from anything, everything would have to stop moving.
Okay. So what's the question and answer here?
I don't know. Is the problem. That's the thing, is what I'm trying to describe I can't even question.
Right.
But it kind of is what I describe as consciousness. and that emergent thing of the physical,
Emergent.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I don't know. It's I'm having a difficult time tying them together now, and that's why I was missing what you were saying when we had that when we were close to having this conversation the last time.
Mm.
So I don't understand mine well enough to write a book on it yet. So I can't speak to you I can't get what's in my head to you.
Right.
I've only been working on this for a couple months.
Yeah. Yeah. No.
So
It's there's I mean, a lot of, I mean, almost everything I've learned is self-taught through other
right.
people have written or what we've studied or come to know about brain function or the functions of our biology.
Right. Exactly. Hey, Bruce.
What up, Bruce?
How's it going?
Good. Talking about biology today. What comes to mind in the biology topic for you?
I don't know. The study of living things. It's pretty broad.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting with you, Bruce, because you have the element of religious conviction, religious belief, and that's obviously at some point along the line going to come into your worldview and come head to head with biology. So how do you reconcile that?
Well, I think that people are constantly in discovery of creation, and so I think if people make conclusions or come to conclusions about the way things are, and I think that's fair game, probably part of our nature, as far as discovery of what currently exists. I think what's difficult is when people start making odd claims about what they currently see existing in biology. And so, um, like for instance, I think we can see people making odd claims about, um, you know, biological sex, versus, you know, um, what sex should be as far as the societal norm in the United States. Well, okay, um, you can make claims about what should be, but if you're not willing to have some ultimate source of your truth outside of what you currently experience, then I can't necessarily take what you're saying about the biology of all people to be objectively true, because it's just subjective. It's just your fallacious mind. So we can observe what is about biology, and I think that's probably a quality pursuit. When people start getting into what should be based on what they have examined, I guess I take issue with that, but
Hmm.
around biology specifically. So I think it's totally great. I think it's probably one of the better pursuits to understand human nature, physical humanities, physical manifestations of human nature, how people interact with one another on a biological basis. All that's great. I think that's fine. I think that people should do that. And to ignore it would be silly. But to make claims about what should occur based in biology because of what we currently understand about biology, that's where I have a problem.
Yeah. So when you think about, like, when you see biological facts being unveiled, Bruce, are you actively, like, relating them to your Christian worldview, or is this something where you think that, or does that only happen sometimes, like when you're in prayer or on Sundays, or is this just a active thing for you?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I don't really I don't really know. I mean, I think when people start making observations, I don't see a problem with that.
Right.
It doesn't always conflict with what I currently believe or hold to be true.
Hmm.
It's just sort of an observation of what I know is true. So it's like something has been established as far as we understand. This is what we're seeing and experiencing. Well, we can talk about what we see and experience.
Right.
I think that's what people are doing. The study of something. Otherwise, you're in future casting and prediction making and silly pursuits of predictions, which I think is just mostly a waste of time.
Well, I mean, although science, a big part of science is replication and prediction, making predictions and trying to, or at least trying to do our best to make predictions. Like, for instance, if we see a big asteroid heading our way, we wouldn't really have a chance against it if we didn't have some kind of systems that would help us to predict the trajectory, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I guess in terms of biology, people are trying to predict a trajectory of the human race based in biology. They can try, but that still doesn't change what ought to be, in my opinion.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think,
Yeah.
that, in my worldview, obviously, I think we can use the is findings of the scientific method to inform our morality, but it still doesn't change the fact that our moral ought proclamations are still subjective, in my worldview. But,
Yeah, I mean, biology doesn't really solve moral questions, in my opinion. People tend to think they do, which is, I think, is where the issue comes with a lot of theists or anyone that has a metaphysical foundation.
yeah.
Like it doesn't solve any of those questions, and I think he's pretending that it does is doing a disservice to anyone trying to make the argument. Even an atheistic type person that would say, you know, that would like to solve the problems of morality through physical material science. I mean, I think that's a silly pursuit. You know, I don't see that as it's no one's going to be convinced that way. And so just continue to base your work in what is, and that's it. And I just don't like when people try crossing over to metaphysics when they're working in material science.
Well, I think Bruce, that we I think you accept that the what is and how it comes into potential conflict with someone's ought beliefs. For instance, do you think a child that requires a blood transfusion to live, do you think parents should be able to deny them that based on their ought convictions?
Well, I think I would say no, because there's something presented to them that they're able to make a decision, and I think most, if not all, people will do anything necessary to preserve the life of their child. So if that's transfusion, then I would say no. I would say that I would not be upset with them for going through it with a transfusion, and if they didn't do that, I would question their moral compass,
Right.
and I would question I would question their belief system.
Yeah.
Because I
So
mean,
yeah.
there's nothing biblical as far as Christianity is concerned that would tell people to sacrifice their child if an option wasn't there.
Right. So my thing on that is that you might have come into contact with someone who has strong religious convictions like you might have, like towards Christianity. However, theirs includes this idea of blood purity, and they're trying to deny at the hospital after a car accident, deny a blood transfusion. It seems like the government, or let's say the global morality, at least in the West, is saying that parents don't have that moral right anymore to make that decision. It's being taken away, and I think that's for good reason.
Well, I don't. I mean, I think that if we're going to take uh, evidence-based approach, I would say provide me the evidence that this is a problem that we need to legislate. So you could take a case by case and make a and bring people to justice by saying they're endangering a child's life. We already have a law for that. See
Right.
what I'm saying? But if we're going to take these edge cases to make larger decisions about what ought to be in the household, that's not okay.
Well, I
You
think.
see what I'm saying?
Look, yeah, I agree. Like each instance needs to be dealt with, and I use the feeding your child only carrots example because we do have some parents that get indoctrinated into these weird diet things, and they try to force them on their children, and we can actually measure and make a proclamation that this is not in the best interest of your child's well-being, regardless of what this crazed mother from the carrot cult.
Yeah, and we have
believe.
biology to help us with that decision because we understand digestion and nutrition.
Yeah,
fairly well, at least.
So
I mean,
so what I see
some
there,
extent,
So what I see there is the is reality that is unveiled by the scientific method actually coming into conflict with someone's ought, and in society we are saying that we're okay with that in certain circumstances, as long as we can demonstrate that the well-being measurement is correct. Because it wouldn't make sense if the government was to say, oh, you can't feed your child a predominantly meat diet. Like that would be a little bit different, right? Like it would the results, the health results probably would be harder to demonstrate it to be a detriment from a well-being perspective if it was a predominantly meat diet that the child was eating instead of just the carrot diet.
I mean, I think that there's all sorts of justification in a lot of people that are interested in religion to making wise decisions based on our understanding and being foolish otherwise. So I don't think that there's any conflict there, in my opinion.
Yeah, I hope
a number of people make decisions based on their understandings of themselves and morally, but like physically, or in this health-based scenario, preservation is a part of our nature, and I think it's a good part, for a good reason.
Yeah.
And so I don't think that I think the biggest difference is typically just people just quibble about where the nature comes from, but as far as like it manifesting the way that it does and using science or what we know to be true, I don't think that there's any I wouldn't make any debate on that.
Well, I am worried about the problem of vaccines. It's become quite mainstream, especially because of the COVID panic, for people to have this level of distrust towards the scientific method when it comes to vaccines. There's so many conspiracy theories being born out of this, and also you
have some precedent, I think, to say like this is a special scenario that is faster than what we were used to. And I mean, even during swine flu, we saw this 2-stage idea floated of this vaccine that never actually manifested.
Right.
And so it's not like these things are coming out of thin air.
No, but
just conspiracies based on nothing.
Yeah. But the thing is like, if you're going to go up against what the let's just put it this way, the hospital recommendation for well-being is going to be, and someone's argument against it is like, well, remember what happened with swine flu? Why didn't that? And then they're like, well, that has nothing to do with this because we're in more of a rush, let's say this time, or we have better technology this time, even though it wasn't that long ago. We just have better methods to test this, and it's not like they're fighting for an enforced vaccine, which I think people would rightfully have a strong case as to why they shouldn't be enforcing vaccines. But that doesn't, that's not a strong argument against like the science behind the vaccine that's being rolled out. But people like are making these like these claims of like, oh, well, we've got to really look at where this vaccine's coming from. And I know Bill Gates has his hand in this, and there's going to be a microchip, I'm sure, hidden in that thing. And it's just, it,
Yeah, there's so much
it's
context around
depressing.
this that it's slightly different as far as society's concerned. There's just it's not the same experience as what we may have experienced in the past. So I think there's enough skepticism that people are skeptical of the motivations of power wielding authorities. I don't think there's anything wrong with that skeptical
I,
nature.
well, no, I think skepticism should be always active. It's our mechanism from sorting bullshit from reality. But if someone is going to claim, Bruce, that this is being uh, abused, or there is something going on, that intuition alone isn't enough to make these claims. Sure, you can say, let's make sure that these checks and balances are in place for these companies, which there are incredible amounts of checks and balances for any new vaccine or anything that's going to be rolled out. It's just it's so thick. It's all built to almost guarantee.
Yeah, I don't know enough about the people against it. I
Right.
think most of the people are against compelling or
Yeah.
mandates. I don't know people that know enough. But then again, I'm not in the. That's not what I've been researching.
Right.
So,
Right.
but I mean, if people came, I would imagine because typically in a lot of conspiracies there are slivers of truth that make them somewhat believable, and
Sure.
so there can be some. There's probably something there, but I think the issue is more of like compelling people to do something against their will,
Yeah.
and
People.
that's more of the problem.
Whenever society does add laws or it does change, and maybe it will become law to be vaccinated against some things, and I think that there's going to be.
Vaccine's really for protecting the vulnerable. It's not for
I
anyone else.
yeah so,
That's typically what vaccines are for.
yeah so I agree, but the argument there, Bruce, is that it, and this is where sociology comes into conflict with hard
Biology.
science. Like you can make the hard science model to show that if everyone got the vaccine for this thing, we could eliminate it. But that's not taking into the consideration of, okay, they're in
People that
reality.
can't get the vaccine. There are people that
Right.
can't get it.
Yeah, in reality, not everyone can get it. In reality, not everyone is going to get it for whatever plethora of different reasons
Yeah,
they
some of
might
the
not get
reasons
it.
aren't nefarious. Yeah,
Yeah,
some of the reasons are totally valid, whatever the case is. Yeah.
right. So yeah, I like when, okay, we take these scientific models of like best case scenario, and then we look at the philosophy, the how human beings tend to deal with it, the psychology, how human beings tend to deal with new
hmm
things like this. And
hmm
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's true. It's an interesting problem to deal with because I think once you start compelling people to do things against their will, people always say, well, you're engaging in the slippery slope fallacy, but I think there is a slope to be concerned about.
I think it's important to identify these slopes, as long as you're not going to claim that we are in the slope. I think that's where I always have the problem. Like someone can claim, like, it's possible or even plausible that there is this or that we are sliding down this slope, and then I'll say, well, wait a sec, we haven't demonstrated that we actually are on the slope yet. You know?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
Mm,
yeah, I mean, it depends on where we start
Right.
because you could start at, well, at one point we didn't have any rulers, or at least we didn't have federal control in this way. So okay, now we're of a nation of states, and there's federal control. Okay, we're in the slope from no control to control.
Right.
I mean, where do you start? Where's the beginning point of the slope? You know, but I think as far as biology is concerned, there's probably a good portion of people that are well skeptical as a part of their nature. And, self preservation is a strong biological pull. So,
Yeah.
they'll use whatever tools available to them to preserve themselves, and that could be conspiracy,
Right.
or it could be,
And I don't want to
the
see,
government.
I think what I don't want to see is I don't want to see conspiratorial thinking get in the way of people's well-being. That's the key thing I worry about.
Yeah, I guess so. As long as people can agree upon what well-being means, or at least
Yeah,
somehow get
and
to objective.
that's why I just point at the hospital and the way the hospitals operate. They operate to maximize the well-being of patients, and I
As
think
far as their physical well-being is concerned, yeah.
well, even psychological as well, Bruce. Like
Yes
it's
and no. I mean, it depends, because there's some people's psychological well-being that would be better off in a home,
no,
or a
no, I agree,
facility.
but doctors and physicians take that into consideration. Like when I talk to physicians or general practitioners, they tell me, like, it's not like they're just you know not weighing the variables of, like, okay, maybe this person just needs to start exercising more because they're missing it, or we need to take care of their sleep patterns and see what happens after that.
Well, how do you compel a person to exercise? That's an interesting similar point. It's like,
Yeah,
you
it's
need to
hard.
exercise in order
Yeah.
to be healthier for most people's lives, right? Or be outside in the sun, or whatever the case. How do you compel people to do that without, someone there with a whip?
Yeah,
You see, and like,
it's tough, man.
that's a hard spot to be in, right?
Well, Bruce, this is why I promote the inspirational power of art and science, and I think that's how our two hemispheres are broken up. And I would suggest that typically those people, when I have conversations with people that are having a motivational problem with regards to working out and things like this, I find that there's some kind of imbalance, or their inspirational meters in their life are running on low, and then looking at that and saying, like, what would some level of art therapy do for you, and this can even be done in your own home, and just start having philosophical conversations about art and science, and what I mean by science, by the way, in this sense of scientific inspiration, getting out and hiking, going on adventures and discovering things, going out to museums, going out to see art. Like there's even a cross contamination of the inspirational power of art and science in that going out to discover art aspect. So I think perhaps one thing that may be part of future diagnostics or future approaches to patient care might be referencing the inspirational power of art and science in your life and seeing where those things are landing or how they're gauging.
Yeah, sure. I think that's fair. It's
Yeah.
uh, there's probably a lot of things biologically that come into play as far as like motivation is concerned, um,
Yeah.
but there's some way, like, for instance, there's some ways to synthesize these feelings, and then there's ways to get these feelings to come through physical activity. You know what I mean? We can create medication to do a lot of the work as far as making people be well, or whatever the case.
Yeah.
But and that may work
Yeah.
as far as medical. So a long time ago, a doctor once told me, uh, we practice medicine, and really all that doctors can do is prescribe medication or treatment for your issue. That's it. That's all they can really do, because there's no cure in most cases, and there's no way they can physically push you into a certain direction. You have to get there somehow. So
Yeah.
they're practicing medicine. And so if you're going to give someone a treatment that's, let's say it's medicine to get them to a better position, that might work. But somebody has to come up with some reason to do the harder road of getting to, wellness versus, let's say, a quick fix that may not last. So where do that sort of thing has to come into play. You have to get some meaning or some understanding, or, and that would maybe art therapy that you're saying. But I would also say that there's probably There's probably a metaphysical component to that, or at least a meaning component to getting somebody motivated.
Yeah, and that's where I think philosophy, like what we do every day here, the intellectual discourse, is an enlightening process to actually discover what that meaning is, or what your own individual purpose might be, at least for the time being. I think that's an important part of artistic and scientific inspiration. Like, what is your purpose? This is a question, and I think people should. And this is Jordan Peterson's self-authoring suite is very, very good at this, to help people identify these things in their life.
Yeah, I know. I remember that. It was good. There's a more of a scientific approach to the question.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that was fair. Um, I think one thing that's interesting that biology has brought us is the ability to meet people where they are more objectively than just like coming at things with guesses.
Well, definitely. I mean, we're not drilling holes in people's heads who have headaches to let the evil spirits out anymore.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. There's also like, I think some of the other things come into play. It's like what is important, and I think some people get kind of wrapped up in like, I need to feel better today,
Right.
and that's not really tenable for a lot of people, and it's not really a fair expectation either. People need to know that these things take time. A lot of times.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, time is an important factor for dealing with things like trauma, and time is an important element to the.
Almost any disease takes time to heal.
Yeah.
That kind of goes back to what I was saying. That we can't process that time. We only understand such a short, limited version of it, that it confuses us. Sorry, that was from earlier. I know not much to do with right now.
Worries.
Just kind of tying it back into, because I know I missed that point with you earlier.
It's the open mic, man.
Yeah, biology is an interesting field of study that I don't know, but like there's biology at a high level, and there's so many specific fields. I mean, to say somebody studied biology, that would probably be an undergrad sort of. I can't imagine someone just saying they're a biologist with no specialty at this time.
Yeah, it's like there's a huge difference between zoology and evolutionary biology. It's like,
but they probably both would fall under the biology category.
Sure. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's so the topic's pretty broad otherwise.
Yeah.
I wonder sometimes if people are this is what bothers me is I think people take the term, like they'll like, for instance, you said zoology and evolutionary biology, or even just biology and zoology, like because we've experienced a large amount of information in a short period of time, like in regards to like the human genome or DNA. We've done a lot of work in discovering DNA and how human beings and animals share a lot of DNA across the but we're still pretty early in all of that, and there's obviously some distinction between animals and human beings, and it's not so clear that it's just nucleotides. There's more to so we either haven't discovered enough about DNA, or DNA has nothing or very little to do with the distinctions.
Well, I think intelligence seems to be a really good measuring stick for the animal kingdom. We see some animals with big brain mass, but not the kind of large brains that we have, or the ones that we identify with intelligence.
Yeah, I mean, what is brain? The size of something doesn't necessarily mean that its utility is any. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean. It's like the amount of genes that are shared versus are different. That could be a much bigger issue than we give credit to. Like the amount of nuance in genetics are probably larger than we imagine.
Yeah, well, it's it's hard to know what. I mean, we've discovered a lot of it, and mapping the genome has been a huge pursuit for humanity, and attempting to understand. I'm bringing up a brain thing here, and attempting to identify genes and categorize them, and this has been a huge endeavor. Where's the just gonna look up. Yeah, the whale brain.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about. Is it the blue whale? It's like supposed to be the size of a
The
bus
blue
or
whale's
something.
pretty huge, so I'd imagine its brain's big.
Yeah, there's a
Right.
Brain size. I'm trying to find this one chart that is really good. It gives yeah, the human brain size grew 200% in only 3 million years. Estimated.
Some people, yeah, there's been among a bunch of evolutionary biologists, anthropologists more so. There was a significant difference, I guess, in the Homo habilis size of the brain, and I guess one of the big factors is humans' ability to kill animals and eat them as far as brain growth was concerned. And one of the early stages of that, I guess, was the fact that we could throw and rotate our
Right.
shoulder in such a way that led us to spear throwing, but also our intelligence, the ability to trap animals and eat them, like put them in pits or throw them off of cliffs and stuff. That's been discussed as far as like how the brain got bigger so quickly, and it seems to be related to animal fat and fire
I'm gonna post
cooking,
this.
getting more food out of an animal.
I'm gonna post this brain map. This one, I finally found it. This one's quite cool.
It's pretty fascinating to think that's true. Definitely pretty fun to imagine.
Yeah.
But I fundamentally reject the notion that humans are closer to animals than anything else.
Well, I mean, we are animals, though, based on like the biological category of the animal kingdom.
The problem is once you start going down that road, is how do you then create like how at what point are you going to make a value judgment of human beings versus an animal in any way in any ways that you act? Because you could say
Wasn't that a
dolphins.
different topic?
Well,
No, because biology is kind of
so I would say
related.
Bruce, that we can still fall into the animal kingdom, but we are, of course, the absolute ultimate dominant species on this planet, with with the capabilities to decide what species get to live and what species get to die, and we've done that.
I'd say that's a difficult statement to completely make in the middle of a pandemic.
Well, I mean, but
I think I understand where you're
but
going.
viruses aren't really
Yeah,
considered.
we have the conscious decision.
Viruses aren't really considered to be life, right?
Well, why not?
I
They
think
are evolved.
every time I've learned about viruses is that they fall into both definitions of living and dead.
Right. And I'm happy to talk about them in both senses. It's this weird.
They're an enigma. They're the Riddler.
It's kind of like it's kind of weird though. It's like it's a function and not life, you know? It's really weird.
Ooh.
Well, the scientific definition of life, I believe, involves a cell. So that's the main distinguishing factor. There's others, I think. But
I'm going to pull up a paper on this.
I personally tend to think of life as anything subject to
So
natural selection.
yeah, so virologists say that viruses are not living things. So viruses are complicated assemblies of molecules, including proteins, nucleic acids,
The machine.
lipids, and carbohydrates. Yeah, a machine is kind of a better way to look at it. But on their own, they can do nothing until they enter a living cell. So they are something that exist inside a living cell, but they
don't enter.
but-
They inject most of the time. I'm sure
Okay,
there are some
well,
that do enter,
just-
but for the most part,
I'm just reading.
that's the interesting thing.
Yeah, I'm just reading.
Oh, I
you
thought
what
you were. I didn't know you were.
Yeah, no,
That's
I'm
interesting.
just reading you what virologists the way they tend to describe them. Here, let's go to
That's different than I learned.
yeah,
Interesting.
I think this is kind of a new way of talking about this, and things need to be updated. But so here we go. Are viruses alive? Although viruses challenge our concept of what, quote, living means, they are vital members of the web of life, which is an interesting way to put it. And I think that's the nuance update that needs to exist. That's good.
That fits into what you and I were trying to describe earlier.
Right.
Much better.
I'm gonna post this.
And I can tie that back in. Kind of. I've had the time to process it.
Scientific American is what I was just reading. Sifis on Twitch was saying, sorry guys, I'm not paying attention to the Twitch chat here. We might. I think it has to do with the virus is not able to reproduce on their own. Yeah, I think. Replication on their own. Cell replication on their own is kind of the trademark of what life is. And Sifis 6 goes on to say we might consider it an arbitrary distinction, maybe like a higher intelligence being might consider us less alive. Interesting. But I think the process is different though. That's why the virologists are not wanting to call it life, because it's not the same process.
I totally understand the differentiation.
Yeah.
And I think I agree with what you said. The nuanced point of view should be that it's a part of the web of life.
Right. It's kind of a process. It's kind of the part of the process of life. You know?
Yeah, like it's essentially just some RNA that creates a protein-esque shell. I don't think it's actually considered protein. And then that shell can interact with the biochemistry of whatever cell it's supposed to.
Right. And bacteria is alive.
Yeah,
different than a virus.
It's a cellular thing that can... The thing is, though, if we define life in a way where it has to be able to reproduce on its own, then macroscopic organisms stop being a part of that, at least the sexually reproducing ones,
right?
Because it would take two of them.
Well, in medicine, the distinction is actually quite significant, because look at how we treat viruses and how we treat bacterial infections. It's a world of difference, and I think it's because the difference of one is a functioning living thing, the other is a process, not really a living thing.
The context that, like, coming at it from a medical perspective definitely makes a lot of difference.
Right.
I think I gotta go.
All right, thanks, Del.
See you guys.
So what I was trying to figure out to say earlier, the crux of my theory on the lower side, smaller,
yep,
is if you take the concept of a one, not our description of it, but whatever it is, if somehow something like that, would, to me, the concept of a one would be the concept of communication, right? Like all wrapped up, like just the meta that is the concept of communication is a one. And if that concept, that meta, like what you're describing with your pleasure drive, were to somehow start spinning with zero resistance, would spin at the speed of causality, giving it mass.
I have no idea what you just said.
I know. So, if you take that spinning concept that imbues it with mass.
Wait, what spinning concept?
Exactly. That's my point. That's where it's really difficult. Your pleasure drive could be what makes up a quark. Right? That if it isn't required, if it's a software thing, right?
Yeah.
Or the software, the meta stuff.
I think the pleasure drive exists as kind of a necessity for pleasure driven evolution. So I think it's in the hardware. I think it's connected to the what maybe will be called the law of life.
Okay.
This is
got it.
Yeah, this has been a awesome conversation. I'm gonna shut it down there, Desired, but I really appreciate you coming by. I'm gonna upload this video. I want people to have a listen. So
no, I appreciate it. Yeah, it was a great conversation.
Thanks,
you.
Man. All right. Desired, Bruce, Michaela, Dal, Sue, everyone who stopped by. That was awesome. Yeah, thanks for stopping by on Twitch, guys. I'm gonna try to keep these a little bit shorter. There's been some feedback about that. So these might be a little quicker. Siphus says, ultimately life and non-living matter is just atoms arranged differently. Atoms arranged differently. However, the environments and of what potential is available to those atoms does vary, though. Siphus 6 again says, one arrangement of atoms contains a system of chemical reactions that self-sustain with an energy source. We call that alive. Yeah, I mean, I think we call it self-replication. But yeah, chemical reactions that self-sustain with an energy source. I don't think self-sustainment is enough, or self-sustaining is enough. I think it has to be able to self-replicate. The cells, at least. But yeah, it's interesting. Thanks for the comment, Siphus. Yeah, thanks for stopping by. I will be uploading this video on YouTube. Thanks for stopping by. This has been the Wonders of Biology open mic. And as always, let art and science inspire.